that talk you gave at NYU. It was very erudite.
Thank you.
Very well done, a very good group of people, and bear with my ignorance of some of the finer points because I think it's very important, but welcome very much. And in the audience, welcome very much to Conversations. We have with us now a newly minted PhD who is involved in understanding, in his dissertation, in understanding the dimensions and the implications of a major information force in terms of the cyber structure of the world, that being the Wikipedia venture. He's written definitively on it, and his name is Joseoh Reagle. And Joseoh, welcome very, very much. Dr. Reagle. Dr. Reagle,
Joseph,
that
please.
sounds nice, you know.
I'm getting used to that.
Yeah, I hadn't even made the connection until just now. Spontaneous connections are really the fun things in life. But welcome, Joseoh, very, very much to Conversations.
Thank you.
We're going to talk in depth about Wikipedia and its implications and so forth. But please share with me your background, born and raised. I know you had a dog named Ginger, as did I. I was drug up by. But share your background a little bit, education, and then we'll wade into and get talking about Wikipedia as an institution.
Okay. So I actually was born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, and I might have a little bit of an accent. I say some things like water a bit different than people up here in New York do.
I don't notice an accent, no.
But I do have a little bit of an accent. People
It's amazing the difference in England. Have you been to England?
Yes.
The difference between just a little bit of distance, you
Some
can
of it's
hardly talk.
incomprehensible.
Yorkshire's way up. It's funny. It's interesting, yeah. That's something they could have an article about in Wikipedia.
No, I'm sure they do.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah.
But I come from Baltimore, Maryland, hun, as
Baltimore?
they say it there. And I've always been interested in computers. My dad was an electrician, and we used to tinker with things like locks and taking apart locks, and then electronics, then home computing systems. And so eventually I ended up as a computer science student at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I also minored in history. But one of the things I began to appreciate was that I was particularly interested in computer security.
Okay.
And it didn't matter how good your technical systems and your organizational systems were for securing your information, if you're an organization or a company.
Yeah.
But someone could just call up and say, hey, I'm Bob from IT. We're having a problem with your account. Could you give me your password?
Yeah.
And so it was actually the social...
Not a wise thing to do.
Yeah, but that was a social attack. It wasn't a technical attack. And actually now this is very common. It's called phishing. It's spelled with a P and a H at the beginning. And so when you get an email from someone saying, oh, I'm Amazon and we think something's wrong with your account, please give us your password, you never want to give them your password.
Thank you. Everybody, say that again. That's
you
the
never
thing.
want to give them your password.
Don't give your password to an account on the internet.
Right. If anyone ever calls you or sends an email asking to give you something, say, I will call you back with the number that I have for the person, whomever you're saying you are.
Okay, that's becoming increasingly important, I guess, right? To do that, to be vigilant in that.
And online fraud is a huge issue. Actually.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And you were interested in the security end of things, right?
Right. So I was interested in security, but one of my insights was that some of the most interesting issues were actually social. It wasn't a technical issue. It was how people communicated.
Okay.
And so actually, after I got my computer science degree from UMBC, I went up to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I studied a technology policy program at MIT. At
MIT? That's a major school.
Yeah, big school. Yeah. I liked Cambridge very much.
Did you get to the Media Lab? Mr. Negroponte still there? Or?
He is not terribly active there anymore, I don't think so. He was quite active with one laptop per child program.
Yes.
I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the idea was there that somehow they would create a laptop that would only cost $100 and make it available to children in developing countries. So I know that had a lot of his attention of late.
But you weren't in that department. What department were you in at MIT?
It was called the Technology Policy Program.
Okay.
Though I took classes at the Media Lab.
You did? Okay, so you were in that milieu. That's a very rich milieu, the whole Cambridge area.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
What is it, Highway 28 or 126 or something that is a research entrepreneurial thing on technology?
Right. I mean, there is a industry research park nearby, and also the interstate had a number of really big companies like Digital, in the 50s and 60s were big employers in the state.
Yeah, right. Okay. And you, was it competitive to get into the computer program at MIT?
I think so.
You must have done fairly well at the university level.
Yeah, I had some very kind professors who recommended me onto MIT.
Yeah.
And then I did pretty well there. And one of the things I did there is that in one of my classes, I worked on a project. Back then, content selection and control was a big issue.
Content selection
Meaning,
control.
should children, should the government have a say in terms of what people put up on the internet? or the web?
Okay.
Or should it be censored?
What years are we talking?
So this is like 1995, 96.
Oh, that was just really taking off big, yeah.
Yeah, and eventually there was a law passed, the Communication Decency Act, that was part of the 1996 telecommunications reform.
Yeah, big change from 34. Yeah.
Right, so I was interested in a number of these policy issues. I did a project as one of my classes where we actually worked with a organization, a nonprofit, that wanted to take the ratings that they applied to video games, to tell parents your children shouldn't buy this, and make them applicable and relevant to the internet.
Okay.
So I worked on that as a case study, and because of that, I came into contact with a group called the World Wide Web Consortium.
Okay.
And that's a group hosted at MIT and a couple other academic hosts around the world, founded by Tim Berners-Lee, the guy that invented the web.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And so I actually went to work there because of the work I did as a student. And when I began there, I was doing policy work, intellectual property, privacy online, digital security, things like that. And I worked there for 7 years. I really liked it. The World Wide Web Consortium was a great place.
Was that after your academic work or no?
So I had my master's, and this was after my master's.
Before your PhD work?
So I worked there for 7 years.
7 years, like you were in the world working with a master's degree?
I was a research engineer at MIT.
And you were with that web consortium, Berners-Lee?
Yes.
In that period of time?
Yes.
So you were, and that was around 95, did you say?
So this was about 96 through 2003.
Okay.
I was at the World Wide Web Consortium.
So you were there during the expansion of the bubble and the beginning obvious bursting of that bubble.
Right.
Were spent with in association with Tim Berners-Lee. You were at the top of the mark, as they would say.
Yeah, it was an exciting
metaphors.
place. I got to travel a lot.
Yeah.
I got to take a little bit of a break. I had met Larry Lessig, who's a...
Stanford.
Right, and come back to Harvard, actually.
He's coming back to Harvard
Yes.
now. They must have a great competition going on for these legendary names of leadership.
They do, and Harvard's winning. They got Yochai Benkler, who used to be at NYU. He's another big legal scholar who's written really important works on free and open source software and open content. I think Jonathan Zittrain is another big legal scholar who used to be at Oxford and is now going back to Harvard.
Okay.
But there is a center there called the Berkman Center for Internet and Society.
Okay.
So I was actually a fellow there for half a year.
At Berkman.
Mm-hmm.
Is that part of a department, or is that separate? Is that
part of the
an
law
endowed
school
thing or something? Part of the law school. See, these things all sort of interrelate, don't they? I mean, all these issues interrelate. And it's sort of a systems-minded kind of environment you've been working in. Is that fair to say? Taking track of, instead of specialized views, trying to get a sort of comprehensive overview of things, or necessarily being in a position where you would take a comprehensive overview in a systems way of what it is you're dealing with?
I would not say I've been systematic or comprehensive, rather fickle and dilly-dallying.
Oh, really? Okay, okay.
Yeah, I mean, things strike my interest, and that's what I want to do.
Okay.
And so actually, after being in Cambridge for about 7 years at MIT and Harvard and the World Wide Web Consortium, I was really interested in wikis and Wikipedias and blogs.
When did that come in, the wiki?
It was actually first developed in the early 90s, 1995. Ward Cunningham developed the first wiki.
Okay.
And it hasn't. The reason it was created for was for an interesting historical reason. When Tim Berners-Lee first invented the web, he called it a web client, not a web browser, because as a client,
web client. Okay, go ahead. Yeah,
you could both read web pages and edit web pages.
I see. Yeah, that is different.
And that was fundamental to his vision of the web from the start.
It was. That was fundamental.
Yes.
Because so that makes it interactive.
Right.
And input on the part of the people. Okay,
but
that's a very important distinction, isn't it?
But then
that
browsers
could apply to
came
political.
along.
That could apply to political philosophy. A difference between representative and participatory democracy. Other big issues that could apply to economics and all kinds of things. That concept.
Right.
That's what I meant. Systems. You had that in mind. You were thinking of that. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
But so when the web took off and really became very popular and most people began to use it, they were probably using something like Internet Explorer or Netscape.
Yeah.
And those were browsers.
Yeah.
Those did not give you the capability to edit the web. So this
they could take you to a place where you could, maybe.
Right. Maybe if you could type something into a form.
Okay.
And that's what Ward Cunningham did. He basically said, I'm going to create this thing that's basically going to put the writing capability on the server side. So your client, your browser, doesn't have to have that advanced functionality.
Right.
Instead, all you have to do is be able to type things into a form.
Yeah.
And that was called the wiki. And that term actually means quick.
Yeah, it's Hawaiian, I understand.
Right. So supposedly Ward Cunningham chose that name because he had been a little bit confused and perplexed in the Honolulu airport.
Yes.
And they said, take the Wiki Wiki shuttle. And he's like, what's that? No, that's the Hawaiian Quick Airport Shuttle.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the name he gave to his creation to indicate the ease and quickness with which you could edit web pages. But he did that in 1995.
Yeah, wait, you could edit them. Now, it's important to say you can edit them, not just say post them.
Right.
An article that you've carefully worked out on the Selectric.
Right, that's a good point,
too. Could be, you know what I'm saying.
It could be revised.
Yeah, that's an important, yeah, good, yeah.
And so he did that in 1995. It really wasn't very well known outside of his community for many years. And eventually it found its way into being used for Wikipedia.
And Wikipedia itself, so it means quick, and pedia sounds like encyclopedia.
Right, it's a portmanteau,
so sort of
a combination of those, you know, the wiki and the pedia stuck together.
A quick encyclopedia.
Exactly.
And as I understand from some of the mission things I've tried to peruse, there's so much about it. They want the vision of it is to create an encyclopedia of all human knowledge.
Right.
Not a small matter.
No.
Makes the genome look easy.
Right.
Because there is, and that's nuanced knowledge.
And there's an encyclopedia of life.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, and the encyclopedia of life is up now, and it's biology, but that's part of human knowledge, and that. And do we get into the arts and so on? I mean, it's quite a very ambitious thing, and it's got this, and so it's a major development, it seems to me.
Well, you might say it's major to the extent that it's been realized, even if imperfectly now with Wikipedia.
Right. And there's arguments about it, yeah.
But one of my historical arguments is that actually this vision of a universal encyclopedia has been around for centuries.
Oh, really? Could you share with that a little bit?
Sure. So I go back predominantly about 100 years ago.
Okay.
At the beginning of the 20th century, where there were a number of people who we might call documentalists. They were kind of the forefathers of information science.
Documentalist is different than an archivist, or
they
a
would
librarian?
Think so. They would think so.
Do you build upon the library science system, Dewey Decimal, or Library of Congress, or how do you put a grid on the reality, or is that relevant?
Well, so there is this question of how do we organize the knowledge that we have, and a number of scholars, for instance, Weinberger says that there's been 3 periods of trying to understand knowledge.
Okay.
The first is we took things and we placed them physically, like on the shelf. The second is we had books and indexes.
Right.
And he says the third, the current age that's maybe represented by Wikipedia, is it's just a mishmash of miscellanea. But that's okay because the mechanisms that we have now are tagging. Sometimes it's called folksonomy. Right, and so we don't need to rely upon any single authority like Dewey to divvy up, 0 through 100 and tell us what all the regimes have to be and how we would subdivide them. Rather, people just tag things.
Tag, okay.
So you just stick like an adjective on it. So if you go to YouTube, if you go to Flickr, or if you go to Wikipedia, they have categories, and people just kind of throw the tags.
I put up YouTube. I got about 500 programs I've put up to the YouTube, and they have tags. And so you type in, like you do Marshall McLuhan, and then you could do Buckminster Fuller, something that relates to it. And that's what you're talking about? Those kind of tags.
Right.
Those are really important. Those are like keywords? Is that different than tags?
Similar, right.
Similar.
And no one's asked you to fit all of your YouTube interviews into some great big taxonomy and hierarchy. Right? It's very flat. You just put the tags in and people search on it.
Okay, now
so some people say that the way information and knowledge is being managed and produced has changed significantly.
Okay, let me go back a few thousand years and say the Vedics, in India and that kind of, they would say there are no academic disciplines in reality. Everything, all or to epistemology or ontology or something, that all knowledge everything is interconnected. It's all a great big seamless web, and we divide it up for convenience sake and so forth. What do we say to those people who say that, and how do we deal with how do we get a handle on things out of just an anarchical everything?
Right. So first, I would agree that the systems by which we have come to segment information, try to manage information, are human constructions.
Or consciousness, even.
Yeah, there's no Platonic ideal for the Dewey Decimal System 200, somewhere outside of the human beings.
Which is better, Dewey Decimal or the Library of Congress? Which do we use?
I don't have a particular preference.
You didn't have to deal with what they call, we used to have things called stacks in the library, and then you had cards that you would divide everything up, and there would be certain numbers, and you'd go down. You didn't have to deal with that when you were doing your research.
In middle school and high school. I mean, not presently.
Yeah, we had, that's all we had, you understand, before the computer and everything.
And there were some benefits to them.
Well,
some people, this fellow by the name of Bakerson, says that one of the nice things about index cards is you could see a popular book by how worn the edges of the card were.
Yeah, but you can see how popular a book is by the number of hits now, much more effectively.
To some extent, right.
You know, it's much more effective. And also, I had a friend of mine, Mark Stallman, he's an investment banker, and he was into cyber, and he took AOL private or public at one. But his dad was a cyberneticist, and he was in the room with Norbert Wiener. And when they coined the term cyber, I guess it means steersman, right? Cyber means steer. And he used to talk about information overload. You can get information overload. And he said that information overload permits pattern recognition. So you're in a system. That system's part of a larger system. And you can get, that's overloaded, or you feel overloaded. But if you're at this level, you can see it. So it makes possible comprehensive overview of whole systems in a way that is operative biologically and so forth, that is operative in systems, but it's also something that's becoming available to us to where we can have a larger comprehensive overview of the totality of what you're thinking about at a systems level. Do you understand what I was just trying to say?
I believe so, and that's actually been one of the
intentions. It's a hope in that we could get a hold of it in a way.
That's been one of the intentions behind reference works throughout their history to some extent, particularly after the printing press. Because before, scholars maybe memorized or knew really well, like if you were in the medieval age scholar, if you had 30 books, that was a big, huge library, and you could dedicate a lot of time to those books, probably classics. But once the printing press really started cranking out texts, people said, oh my goodness, we're being overwhelmed. And so in a sense, a reference work was a response to the proliferation of information.
Right. Time magazine had a thing, I think it was at the end of the century, or the end of the millennium, so they had a thing, who were the 100,000 most important people in the history of the world at this very breaking point? Number one, it came out, was Gutenberg. And the printing press had that big a significant effect upon technology and information and so forth. So that's going back a little bit further, but that also was linear, and that was also Marshall McLuhan saying the medium is the message, and understanding information technologies, and we're coming into electronic media. And he used to say, if I may, he used to say, we visited with him every summer. I couldn't get close to him, but he was a brilliantly wired fellow. And he said that the medium is the message, that the medium by which things are being communicated is more important than the message that we pay all the attention to. Also that Western thinking was the result of the phonetic alphabet, linear thinking. You're thinking linear rather than all at once. And so television, well, I'm getting off on other ways of thinking. I didn't mean to get to, it was very interesting you were talking about the indexing system and the basic patterns by which the information is being understood.
Managed and understood.
And you said you'd like to dabble in a lot of things you're interested in rather than having a systems overview of it. But that systems overview is what's the steersman quality of the cyber philosophizing and implementing of policy. And so it would seem to me, trying to get some sort of a pattern, particularly if you're going to do an encyclopedia that's going to contain all human knowledge, nuanced. Seems to me a very great challenge in order to try and get at that.
Right.
I'm sorry, I've been running off at the mouth.
Well, that's okay, but I was just going to point out that
yes, please.
It seems to me that the predominant character of the way that this content is being produced at Wikipedia and things like Flickr is that it's very much emergent. No one is planning it. And so there was this interesting wrinkle that I was going to note that when we talk about classification things. Again, there is no perfect Platonic ideal for those classifications.
No taxonomy? Or
it's not perfect. It's a human construction, and it's very susceptible to human bias. Right? And so that's a whole other interesting angle. And if knowledge is socially constructed, what kind of biases are there? And there's a fascinating literature, a lot of authors who have spoken to that issue. But where we are now is no one is trying to control this, in a sense. People are just producing it, and we're seeing things kind of emerge from the bottom up.
Maybe we could talk a little bit for the audience what it is. Wikipedia? We've been talking around it. I've been rambling on. But you maybe explain to the audience that may not be aware. Maybe some of them don't even have a computer.
Right. Okay.
You know, they only have cable television to rely upon.
So Wikipedia is one of the top online sites. I don't know if it's in the top 10, but it's certainly close.
They would measure that by quantity of content?
Number of people that visit it.
Number of people,
In terms of content, it's certainly very large, but I don't know how it would measure. And it is a huge, sprawling, fascinating, sometimes frustrating encyclopedia that's available for free of cost. And the really interesting thing about that is this idea of a universal encyclopedia has been around for decades, maybe centuries. But the interesting wrinkle about Wikipedia is it only became possible when not only access became universal, but production became universal.
Production of content?
Right, because people had tried before and kind of failed for various reasons. But once they opened it up and said that anyone can contribute, anyone can edit, that's the byline, did we see this boom in content production.
Okay, so you've got to think that somebody can put up let's say they got a Wikipedia page on the American Revolution, and somebody puts it up a definitive, you go to the Encyclopedia Britannica, there's a long article you could write, written by a scholar or something, and it's there in print, and you can read it, and you can have repair to that in order to do it. With Wikipedia, you could have such an article explaining it with pictures and so forth, maps, charts, all this kind of thing, really educationally important. But somebody could come in and say, well, the fact that he thought George Washington crossed the Delaware on August 6th is not correct. He crossed on August 7th, really, because it changed, and then change what the article said. And they can edit it and have input and change the articles that have been written in order to give definition to something. Is that correct?
Right. So that's the openness of Wikipedia.
That's called, okay.
There's some benefits and there's some challenges. So
I would think so, particularly in the world of scholarship.
The benefits are that will anyone contribute? Maybe someone who doesn't have a PhD or even a college degree still knows something about a lot about something.
Increasingly, it's the case.
And can contribute.
It's called autodidactic.
Some of the smartest people I've met never went to college.
Right. Bill Gates dropped out, didn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, some of our leaders just gave us an example of not going to school. Buckminster Fuller thinks colleges are just there to get people so specialized out they won't think about the big patterns and become a threat to the people who run the planet and do think about big patterns. You understand? You understand?
So these people have an opportunity to contribute now, which is a good thing. The barriers to cost are fairly low.
Well, if it's free, that's pretty good cost. That's a good price in any currency, no?
Right. But the downside is vandalism, that you can come, people who aren't really interested in the mission of providing access to the sum of the world knowledge can come in and mess things up.
The Visigoths, the barbarians at the gate, all of that kind of thing, right, to the people who are keeping the canon of any particular discipline.
So that's the challenge of openness.
Is that a challenge to open source then, too, when you make it, in terms of the computer, when you have the open source movement and that sort of thing? Is it applicable to that issue, or are they similar, or what? Or how do they relate?
Not to the same extent, because Wikipedia was certainly inspired by the free and open source software movement, but that is very much characterized by a very strong meritocratic community. And so the people
Academia.
No, but it is a coder, it's a bunch of hackers, and they've developed software. If you want to come along and start changing and making patches and additions to their software, they're going to review what you do. So it's called revision control, how you manage the software.
Okay, that's
and you're not going to get the keys to the revision control until you prove yourself in some way.
Well, is that sort of a redolent of the scientific process and
I think
peer-reviewed things and all that,
yes.
By which the keepers of the canon will make sure that somebody's not going to follow things up.
So in the software development community, they keep a much kind of tighter control on the content that they are collaboratively producing.
We're talking two different things, if I may. Content we're talking about, then we're talking about the software.
Right.
And so that's like a design thing or something.
Right.
The other thing is the content.
And so content in Wikipedia was inspired by this open source software.
Okay.
But they're not exactly the same, and sometimes people conflate them.
Important distinction?
Another way that they're not the same is that software compiles. That means you can run it. So if someone makes a contribution to your software, does it increase the speed of the software?
Or does it foul it up?
Or does it add a feature? Right. So it's very easy to see whether someone has made a good contribution or not. If someone makes an edit to Wikipedia and they change the birth date of Francis Bacon, was that fixing a bug, or was that introducing a very subtle vandalism?
That was vandalism, or what if they got what do you call them, pranksters?
Right.
Or
Exactly.
they want to just mess things up for the hell of it, and because it's funny to see people get all bent out of shape and that kind of thing.
Right. In about a month and a half, Wikipedia is going to face the most difficult day it faces every year.
Wait a minute. You're going a month and a half from now, as we talk in early almost March, yeah.
February. Yeah. Under 2 months. It's April's 1st. Because everyone thinks, wouldn't it be funny if I played a April's 1st joke?
Oh, April Fool's Day.
Change something in Wikipedia. And so some people just say, why don't we just lock Wikipedia for that day?
Yeah.
Because it's going to be so much trouble rolling back all of these things that people are throwing in there.
I'm sorry. That's how much it's like Halloween, right? It's conflated with Halloween. And all bets off. You can just go and knock it out. And let's just give out all those codes to the atomic weapons systems around the world and see what happens, or something like that. I understand. I'm sorry, we're laughing.
That's okay.
So April 1 is always the bad day. April Fool's Day, right? Yeah. But the thing is that Wikipedia, and then so they can do that. Now, what do you get? What is the reaction of, let's say, now you were talking with Berners-Lee. You were talking with people who have the canon, who understand it, who have responsibility for this great big thing, the whole cyber thing. You want to guard against, I heard you use the term hackers. You want to guard against people coming in and messing up the system that's in place. They're metaphors to the political. And then you're guarded, you have a mission statement for Wiki, and you're guided by certain philosophical principles and understandings of the evolution of consciousness, man's role in that, the nature, human nature, basic philosophical assumptions of what life, what it's all about, and that kind of thing. And what are some of the grounding principles that are relevant to the mission statement and some of these other aspects that are relevant to the foundation of, let's just say, Wikipedia?
So first, just to clarify, because I know the term hacker is sometimes misconstrued, I used it in a positive sense. Sometimes people see hackers in a negative sense.
Mostly people would see hackers
They
that
do,
way.
but within the software development community, hacking is a good thing.
Well, I've been to some of the hacker conferences. They're great guys. It's anarchical attitude.
It's a bit anarchic.
Creative.
It's meritocratic, but it's humorous.
Yeah,
and it's very playful.
Yeah, I understand.
Now,
like Abby
said,
Hoffman,
right,
trying to levitate the Pentagon was cool.
Right, or steal this book. You know?
Or you steal this book, or he threw
so
dollar bills on.
He
threw dollar bills on the floor of the and then laughed. I don't know if they had videotaped them as the guys are picking them up off the floor of the Wall Street. You know that. Yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to. Okay. So when I was speaking of hackers, I wasn't
totally
speaking
in
of
sync
people
with
that
you
are
there because
violating.
I understand.
System security, but people that enjoy producing things.
Yeah.
But to your question, what are some of the key, norms and principles of Wikipedia?
Yeah, and founding principles and philosophy, mission statement, and that sort of thing.
And so one of my arguments actually is that there's something called the zeroth law of Wikipedia. There's actually a lot of Wikipedia laws. These are just things people have invented and coined to describe what happens at Wikipedia.
Okay.
And the zeroth law of Wikipedia is that while it works in practice, it can never work in theory. So part of my work, because you can't deny, the website is there, it works in practice.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, this shouldn't work. Theoretically, this doesn't make any sense. How could you have all these people, these strangers, work together in a productive way? And so I've seen my job in doing my research is to provide a theory as to why it works. And one of the reasons it shouldn't work is another law called Godwin's law.
Godwin, I've heard of it, I don't know.
Right. And so this was coined in the 1990s with respect to Usenet discussion groups. And it said that the longer a conversation goes on online, the more likely the possibility that someone will call someone else a Hitler or a Nazi.
Yes.
Right? So conversations, particularly online, because we don't get to see nonverbal communication and we don't know these people, tended to devolve into name-calling, basically.
Aren't we going to see some of that nonverbal communication as webcams and Skype-type things and interconnections are going to become involved?
I think to some extent.
I mean, we're in multimedia now. McLuhan said you're coming into a multimedia environment transcending transcending linearness. Now non-linear editing, all kinds of things. There's going to be, people are going to be streaming from their cell phone, a cable channel, all of this. So multimedia is coming into the reality now where it hasn't been possible in the
And
past.
that might shape the way that people interact online.
Yeah.
But it has been a challenge for Wikipedia because how are we going to get all these people to collaborate and cooperate when it's a challenge, and maybe sometimes people think the worst of each other.
Suppose we have, by 10 billion, we'll just say, just for the hell of it, increase in bandwidth come out of our labs, so that we have unlimited bandwidth capability, so that there could be Wikipedia-type exchange using multimedia, and you could edit Gone with the Wind, or you could edit anybody's thing, but you're dealing multimedia rather than just text or graphics and pictures, but actually moving images and that sort of thing. Holography will be coming, that sort of thing.
It might.
But, you know what I'm saying? Because that stuff's coming exponential and beyond now. We're getting to carbon-60 soon. They're going to go faster than Moore's Law. And it seems to me our capability is just going exponential.
Seems like you're a fan of Kurzweil.
I love Kurzweil. I think Kurzweil is very good. I'd like to understand his economics a little better. I don't know what the hell we're going to do. Maybe you could use Wikipedia to solve this problem with the deficit and the problem we have currently with this looming recession. But that's getting off into politics and things, which is a whole other realm. But I didn't mean to take you off track. Go back to where you were thinking.
So I was eventually meandering to the what are the key cultural norms of Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And so my argument is that despite, Godwin's law that says people don't tend to behave very well online, Wikipedia had to offer its own collaborative norms and principles that say, when you come here, this is the way we need to work together.
Okay.
And for instance, one of those is, be nice to the newcomers. So there's a Wikipedia policy page that talks about how we have to be nice to people when they come in. Or there's a policy called Assume Good Faith.
These are part of like the golden rule and
right,
things
these
that
are
are
stuff you
ethics
can
coming out of history.
learn on the playground in kindergarten.
Or as your mother's knee, or daddy's knee. Yeah.
But like the Assume Good Faith says, just because someone comes in and does something that it doesn't seem that you like,
keep your eye on the son of a gun.
You can do that, but don't assume they're there to wreck the project.
Right, because a lot of people have that.
That's the first assumption we make. That's under attribution theory. There's something called fundamental attribution error.
Right.
And it's a cognitive bias, and it says that the way that we construe attributions towards others is not very favorable sometimes. So if something good happens...
Might depend upon your conditioning or your life's experience and things like that.
But it's a cognitive bias.
And remember, James Joyce, he was the best writer on technology, I think, in the history of humanity in terms of understanding the electronic communication. He said, history is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken. And it's been a pretty unjust and pretty damaging thing to any kind of a sense of self-worth by the vast majority of people within the human experience. History is a nightmare. So there's a lot of deterrence if we're coming to a new kind of condition in the universe or something. Did they ever get to thinking about the evolution of universal consciousness that began uniquely with humanity 200,000 years ago? We now have weapon systems that are destructive to the point where if they're unleashed it would mean the end of our entire species?
No, I mean, for the most part, Wikipedians are very pragmatic. So
pragmatic, okay.
So there are certainly people there who care about that.
I'm getting at the basic philosophy or reading of things. What's it all about, Alfie? What's the universe about? Is there any purpose to evolution? Any purpose to humanity's existence or biological evolution or basic grounding comprehensive principles that short of spirituality?
Right. So there are some thinkers out there who might think that this idea of emergent intelligence, sometimes it's called crowdsourcing, crowdsourcing, or the wisdom of the crowds, that somehow Wikipedia is an exemplar of the human improvement movement.
Human improvement?
Or like these ideas of universal consciousness and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
But I would say actually Wikipedia itself is very pragmatic.
Okay.
In fact, people use Wikipedia in all sorts of arguments.
Right, okay.
They use it as a proxy and exemplar. In fact, reference works are frequently used in cultural battles. Like Webster's Third was published in the 1960s.
Yeah.
When it came out, it was soundly criticized by cultural critics.
What's it? Yeah, I didn't
For
know.
having things like the word ain't. And when I was in kindergarten, I learned ain't a word.
Yeah.
But they were serious flaming between scholars about whether this new version of a dictionary represented the fall of Western civilization.
What are they going to do with text messaging, where they're using letters for words and everything?
And so Wikipedia is happening in the same way. And in some regards, some people are saying Wikipedia is, the next step in human evolution. Other people are saying it's the end of Western civilization.
And all standards are going to hell and everything, right?
And so I'm kind of interested in those conversations. I don't take part in them. I don't, I'm not part of the expanding consciousness movement or anything like that.
You're not?
No.
Not just inherently interested in that?
No.
Okay.
I know you are.
Fair enough.
I'm very pragmatic.
Okay.
I'm very pragmatic.
I'm terrible that way. I'm not pragmatic at all.
And so if I see something, if I see a group of people that are producing something that is useful and helpful to the world,
latch on.
That's what I get very excited
and get it.
about.
Okay, good. Okay, good. And this is, right? Okay, well, it takes all kinds, you know, and everything. There are 100 trillion cells in the human organism. Did you know that? 100 trillion.
I have a question. I keep hearing that the majority of cells in the human body are not human.
I don't understand that. I can't understand.
They don't have human DNA. That they're, you know, like in our guts, we have all kinds of different cells that aren't human cells, but they go along with us.
Okay, I don't know that. That's something I don't know.
That's something I always hear said, but I don't know the particulars of it.
What is it you hear said? That the cells in the body are not human cells?
That the majority of cells in the human body are not actually human DNA.
That's really interesting. They're not human DNA. That's interesting. But
bacterial and viral and...
Well, bacteria, yeah. We all walk in a sea of bacteria. In this room, we're all walking in a sea. And bacteria was a form of evolution for about 6/10 of the evolution process itself. We're only just a recent comer to all this and everything. The question is, where are we going to be after we get past where we have been? You understand that kind of thing?
To that, I do not know.
You don't know? You don't know? I thought you could give me the answer to that.
I'm sorry.
No, but 100 trillion, and they all count. That's interesting, that thing you say. See, you're bringing up dissonance, right, in my pattern, which I'm happy to have. So I'll have to go back and rethink it. But that's from and 100 trillion cells, and they all matter. And so they're all part of a system with DNA. Now you're telling me that it isn't. See, that's I got that from the New York Times, you know, that kind of piece of information. Now that could be corrected, and it's self-correcting. And expert systems can correct themselves. And the process of learning can correct itself with input. But the point being here, the democratic one of every cell in the human organism matters, and every one is able to get what it needs and everything. And there's a democratic function in a systems way of a biological entity called a human being. And 100 trillion, it makes the internet look simple. Same with a frog. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get waylaid and everything, because I'm off on things that I shouldn't be on. But anyway, I'm just
That's okay.
What's it all about, you know? So are you optimistic for the human prospect? Or do you think about that?
I don't know. I'm an agnostic on a lot of sort of larger...
You accept sort of synergy. It's a behavioral system's there's something... a priori synergistic mystery will be the pattern in which all consciousness will evolve. We'll get to a level, we were Australopithecine, we become Homo habilis, we become Homo sapien. We're coming to the end of 200,000 years of having been Homo sapien, and there will be a new thing emerge up the evolutionary line in terms of broader patterns of which we will interrelate if we make it without self-destructing, which is sort of the big-time challenge that humanity is confronted with now with weapon systems that can wipe everyone out and also might be able to liberate us from the ancient scourges and the ignorances out of which we come. You don't deal with those kind of questions in Wikipedia understanding?
No. And in philosophy, those are, you know, what you're espousing is known as teleology or
teleology. Yeah, you're right.
And I do study that with regard to technology, because very often technology does inspire people to think along those lines.
Absolutely, because the main thing, we're not different, I think, biologically than we were 200,000 years ago. But the technology and the extensions of consciousness, which is technology, that's what's changing. So there's a connection between those two things. Don't you think inherently so?
But I do not think we're headed toward any particular end, a priori end. I view history as very contingent. I'm very fond of evolution. I'm very kind of pragmatic. And so, you know, the supervolcano in Yellowstone Park might go off and obliterate us all in a month. So, I mean, that might sound a little bit pessimistic.
I don't think there's a possibility of that.
Oh, well, there is.
I don't think the only thing... Oh, is there? You know that from a Wikipedia article?
Oh, I'm sure you can find it.
There is a volcano
There's a supervolcano
There is a supervolcano in the United States that could eliminate the entire Homo sapiens species. Is that a fact? That's very interesting. Could you send me a link to that?
Sure.
I'd be interested in that. Anything else out of the natural world that has that species lethal?
In New York, we'll be in big trouble if a chunk of the Canary Island falls into the Atlantic, which it does.
I've seen that with the super wave.
Huge tidal wave.
New York, that's New York, but that's not the whole species.
Right, so
the
comets,
species,
comets. This just happens to be a little bit a hobby of mine, but in the past couple of years there's been a number of really interesting books. One was called The World Without Us.
Yeah,
and
that's
they talked about
I've seen that book.
If all the humans were gone, how
Yeah.
long would it take for the world to restore and kind of rebalance itself?
Well, it's a question of how much we could do it. I really, that's something I'm really interested. I think about. I don't know where you got that. That's new. That when something's new, it's really interesting to me.
So I tend to collect these as examples.
Yeah.
One of the things that were, not to be too pessimistic, but every once in a while that the magnetic sphere of the Earth
it
flips,
does. It flicks.
when it does that, it's very weak.
Yeah.
And so we would be very suspect to solar storms, which would totally wipe out all of our communication satellites.
That
and
would really,
a lot of the electronics on this planet.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't wipe us out as a species, but as a society, it would be the end of the world.
That's interesting about the volcano. I don't know that. I know about the super wave out of the Canary Islands and that kind of thing that could happen. You know, the, what do you call it, the Andreas Fault, these kind of natural things, and that we got long-term global warming or all these kind of things. But I'm thinking the only thing that could really do it, from some of the studies that I've been able to find, and Nicholas Wade and some other people, are the actual weapon systems that we've developed as very clever extensions of our consciousness. Now are species lethal for the whole of the human society. They weren't so in the Second World War. Something new existential is going on in terms of the broader evolution of whatever we're part of. And that's brand new. I mean, just since about the year 1970. We reached that capability. We're so clever. But I think that is the case. It can only be modeled, isn't it? It'd be like what you call in Wikipedia a sandbox. You have a thing sandbox? Where
That's a place where you can edit without hurting live
That's
real
be like
pages.
modeling. So the idea that the weapon systems, if some great hatred, and we've been exchanging for much of our existence, one group stealing the grain from another, geopolitics and all of this, Israel, Kashmir, something like that, and in the practical world, and there was to be an unleashing of it'd have to get to the unleashing of the weapon systems of the United States of America, because that's where the storehouse really is. But if that were to happen, apparently the modeling shows that there would not be a single human being survive.
Right.
So that's unique to this time. It couldn't have happened in 6 BC, or you know what I'm saying?
Well, there could have been a comet strike.
No, a comet could hit, an asteroid could hit. They have. Some of the research we've done, we could maybe detect that from far enough off to prevent that, and we got a technological capability to avert that. That's natural. That's something coming out of the natural environment. But we've reached this other point. And then on the other side, we have an incredible capability of providing for everybody with ecological design and with a sense of ephemeralization, doing more with less, good design. We could provide for everybody, whereas out of history, there's always been scarcity, never enough for everyone, that sort of thing. There could be a kind of utopian view of humanity linking with the ecology, and we would come into a new liberated order at the end of this human experience, and we would come into a new relationship to the end time without going to spirituality and that. We live in that time whether we like it or not, is what I'm saying. It's like the end of a pregnancy. None of that enters into the thinking of Wikipedia?
No.
Okay. It's another thing.
Right. I mean, Wikipedia is not a place to discuss philosophy. If you're concerned with evolution versus creationism, Wikipedia is not the place to have that sort of discussion.
Okay.
In fact, there's 3 norms that really guide Wikipedia.
Okay, good. That's what we're here. I'm sorry. I have a tendency to talk to you. You must not let me do that, okay? Okay.
And so the one is neutral point of view.
Okay.
So when they say when you come to Wikipedia, what Wikipedia is trying to do is not argue about what is right and wrong and what is true and false, but merely to capture and represent all the knowledge claims out there in the world, to bring them together, but not to adjudicate between them. So that's neutral point of view.
Well, wait a minute. That question of whether you could destroy the whole of the society would be something that could be brought up, and there would be a lot. I'm sorry.
Right, but
how can you get around certain kinds of value judgments and modeling and suggestions and everything? You can't be totally neutral, can you? Or how can you be neutral unless you're thinking Democrat, Republican, or some sort of dialectical world? But the world is much more complex than that.
So the neutral point of view has a bit of a confusing name, because some people will read that to say, oh, well, Wikipedia is not neutral. There's bias here. There's bias there. Perfectly neutral objective knowledge is impossible. But what it is, it's saying, you as a contributor, we want you to take an epistemic stance, to come not to fight about what is right or wrong or what you believe is true, but to capture and represent knowledge. So say there are people who think that Wikipedia is part of the next stage of evolution of human
think
knowledge.
it well might be, yeah.
So
yeah.
find a peer-reviewed, reputable argument, and we can write an article about that view. But we're not writing an article to say whether it's true. We're writing an article to say, here's what that view is. Here's what that history is. It started with Teilhard, you know.
Chardin was great. Yeah.
And then this thinker,
he's buried in
thinker.
Poughkeepsie. Did you know that?
Who's that?
Teilhard de Chardin.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's buried in Poughkeepsie, just upstate from here.
Right.
We
so
used to go
you
celebrate
could have a wonderful
Phenomena Man. It's great,
right.
yeah.
So you could have a wonderful encyclopedic article about that. But again, it's not arguing whether this is going to happen or not. Then you could have the dystopian
I'm trying to
point
see
of view.
the distinction. What if you're making a point on something? I don't quite understand what that distinction is. How can you write so that you don't? How can you illuminate anything if you're going to be? How can you be that way? I don't understand.
Well, there's other wikis. There's like Debatepedia. So in Debatepedia,
wait, that's other than Wikipedia,
right?
Okay.
And so they actually have two columns. They have the pro and they have the con. And there's wiki info. So there's other wikis out there that say, we want to see the argument. We want to see the people go back and forth.
Yeah, that would be like a legal mind. Or
but that's not Wikipedia. Wikipedia says every single argument out there that's been made by some reputable person, you know, that other
how
people have read.
How do you decide it's reputable if it's open to everybody, if it's really open source?
Well,
how do you decide
Wikipedia
what's
has
reputable?
a materialistic sort of bias. So they want to see things that have been published. They want to see peer review. So you might have some amazing new physics theory. You have solved the grand unification theory. Like I know you've had Michio Kaku on here a couple of times.
He's great.
Right.
Michio Kaku is great.
So he might come up with the unified field theory.
That's Einstein, yeah.
But he can't
He's got the answer.
He
a lot
can't
of people
put
think
that on Wikipedia until he gets it published.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of people out there who think they have solved it.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of people who think they have a cure for cancer, and there's all kinds of things like that.
And so Wikipedia wants to avoid pet theories and kookishness. So another
where
one
did
that's normed is no original research. So Wikipedia is not a place for original research.
I saw one woman who was talking about language. Everybody's going to end up speaking English. It's like getting all the language diversity is like taking the color out of painting. And it makes me think of Van Gogh. Van Gogh was down in Arles painting all those paintings. Remember? He painted all those paintings, and nobody thought in the peer-reviewed gallery, you know, the museums, what are we going? We're not going to put that nonsense up because it's utter nonsense. Because the artists are the intent of the race; they're ahead of the mass of the peer review, and the peer review people are all co-opted by the political people, and the money is all going through peer-reviewed institutions. So new ideas cannot emerge because it won't ever. Where are the new ideas relevant going to be able to appear if they're going to be endlessly cut down by some sort of peer-reviewed thing that just reifies the old order?
Right. Not on Wikipedia.
Not on Wikipedia. Okay.
Wikipedia in that sense is inherently conservative.
Okay.
This is not the place to come and to proffer original theories. Because it would make the task of making an encyclopedia, frankly, impossible. And so they say, that's great. We might even miss something that's really brilliant out there.
Yeah.
But we think if you have patience in 100 years or so, it will be recognized and it'll get on Wikipedia.
Right. Okay.
But there is
that's
negative risk. That
well, that's what I was asking you about.
I
thought I read about Wikipedia. They have something like a sandbox. Well, we're in public access now, okay? Public access is open to the people. Most people don't want to hear from the people because the people don't know. They haven't been to Harvard. They haven't been this. They haven't got peer review. They're not going through the canon keepers, the gates that keep everything in place, which is in a certain sense inherently conservative, probably properly so in terms of the evolution of larger events. We need to be anchored to history, but we need new ideas as well. But they had a concept of Wikipedia. I thought it was called like a sandbox. You can go and you can create, you can put some. Why don't you have something with Wikipedia where those ideas can be parked? But they're not, and public access is open to anybody. Anybody can come in. You could start a program here. You want to become multimedia? You could come here and start a program and talk about things that are of interest to you and so forth. And but it's not NBC. It's not one of the great networks. It's not national, that kind of thing. It involves the people. You got 3,000 places across the country. Any citizen can come in and do multimedia. Do you like that idea?
I think it's a great idea.
Now, maybe we shouldn't have them in because they haven't been peer reviewed. They're just coming in and say, I want to do it.
So it depends.
Now, how do we deal with that kind of democracy thing? And it's obviously emerging on the world scale when you got everybody walking around with a cell phone that can create a TV channel. So multimedia. So you see, the world is bringing a democracy like every one of the 100 trillion cells in the human organism matter. We don't just have the peer-reviewed people up in the cranium.
Right.
Or, do you understand? Mm-hmm. Okay, how do we deal with that contradiction?
So we have indie media, we have blogs, we have all kinds of wonderful things out there. So Wikipedia doesn't have to be everything in the world.
Well, I thought you said you were going to have an encyclopedia.
Wikipedia is an encyclopedia. There are other new media technologies available that will help people who are not credentialed, who are not part of the canon, the gatekeepers, make their positions known. That's just not for Wikipedia. That's for a blog, like set up a blog.
Yeah.
But there is a wrinkle at Wikipedia, which is how do we deal with the biographies of living people?
Okay.
So I've known a couple of people who have, because they're famous for whatever reason, they're notable, they have a Wikipedia article. They see an error in that article, and they go to fix it. And the Wikipedians say, well, on what authority are you changing that information?
And it's their own biography?
I have a press report that says you're 32, when in
fact, you're saying you're 33.
And so Wikipedia has this problem.
How do they deal with those?
Well, some people have said that they should create a blog or publish something somewhere else that says their true age, and then that can be referred to. But this is one of those areas where
it's like a footnoting thing, or that's what I was thinking of the sandbox idea.
Neutral point of view, verifiability means that any claim that's on Wikipedia should have some sort of source to a reputable authority and no original research.
So it is conservative in that sense.
It is very conservative.
A lot of I saw a thing in the New York Times. They had a thing about this was the thing for the unabridged English dictionary, 12 volumes. This was the Encyclopedia Britannica in terms of bytes of information, and it went off the top of the page. It was Wikipedia. So there's a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of shaking going on in terms of this Wikipedia and a lot of things that are going. And it's an extremely important thing. And I've talked to a lot of scholars. I have a lot of friends who are scholars, and one of their briefs is they're going to mess with the canon. They're going to mess with the understanding that I have in this. Also, they're going to bring it into a larger context, and they think it's anarcho and not responsible. And you're saying it's very conservative, keeper of the canon.
So it depends how you look at it.
Yes.
But just because Wikipedia is the largest knowledge project perhaps in the history of humankind.
Yes, it's huge.
Doesn't mean it's the receptacle for everything.
Well, okay, then it's a receptacle for all human knowledge except some. That's like saying...
for encyclopedic type human knowledge.
That's like saying all animals are equal except some.
But this is one of the great religious wars at Wikipedia.
Yeah, I suppose.
It's called inclusionism and exclusionism.
Right, exactly. That's another one of those basic dialectics.
So they argue this argument for years now about how wide should be in terms of accepting, topics to take on. So, for example, every single episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer has its own Wikipedia article.
Okay.
Some people will say that's ridiculous. This is an encyclopedia. It's supposed to be helping people learn important things. Why is this in Wikipedia?
Buffy the Vampire.
Other
that's
people
really
will say, I like Buffy, and I like the articles.
Right.
But other people will say, what's the harm? Creating a new Wikipedia page doesn't cost anyone anything.
Right.
It's just another bit on some hard drive somewhere.
Information's going to reduce to zero. We're going to have just an incredible... When we get to carbon 60, we're going to be exploding into new kinds of capability that have not been available. We may be transcending scarcity in an ontologic sense. So all the situations and the keepers of the canon are likely to be challenged by, like when the water breaks at the end of a pregnancy, it's a whole new ballgame. We may be coming to that.
Right, but the challenge,
but we got to make sure we get there.
Proliferation of information.
Yeah,
sometimes people make this distinction: is it knowledge and is it wisdom?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
And so we're still going to need the means to somehow discern what of value is out there.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, you can Google,
and it's evolving.
You can Google anything in the world and find something.
Yeah.
But is it of value?
I think we could use better source, don't you? I think the source process or the search process could be improved.
Sure.
So you can get to things. And I think it is it's getting better. It's getting more. We're having more and more all the way.
But that problem hasn't been solved in terms of finding trustworthy, reputable information. And people say Wikipedia has this problem, and they're working on it. They've been slow to get around to it.
It's an inherent problem, I think.
Right. But for instance, they might start allowing people...
It's not just Wikipedia, although especially so,
But people are going to start experimenting with, I think maybe the German Wikipedia version.
They have a German?
Oh, yeah, there's dozens of them all over the world.
Different languages.
Allowing people to rate Wikipedia pages. And so maybe that will help us get a better sense of the
They
quality.
can do
of
that with the
Wikipedia
YouTube multimedia things you put up. They rate them, and then they can also make comments and everything. Can people make comments on it? Do they have that feature
Every
in
single
Wikipedia?
Wikipedia article, if you look at the top, there's a number of tabs,
Yeah.
and there's a talk page.
Okay.
So on the talk page, you can see people make comments about the article, make suggestions, ask questions. So every single article has the capability to have
And
people
can
talk
anybody?
about it.
What's the thing that keeps that person, let's say, disagrees or thinks to do their own Wikipedia page? Do you have to be credentialed with a PhD degree in order to do a Wikipedia page? You're just an autodidact who knows a lot?
It is meritocratic.
How do you make? Who makes the decision on what's going to be allowed to have a page?
So Wikipedia supposedly works by consensus.
By consensus.
And when I say supposedly, I don't mean to denigrate the way things work there. Only that consensus is very difficult, even in the best of circumstances.
Yeah, right.
But particularly at Wikipedia, because it is open.
Yeah, right.
And
democracy can be messy.
Right.
Yeah.
And particularly Wikipedia, there's this phenomenon called sock puppets, where people will create other accounts. So I'm Joseph, but I can create 5 other accounts that agree with me. And so just imagine if I want to cause difficulties, what difficulties I can create. Right.
Yeah.
By creating all these other
April
people.
Fool's Day.
And so now you've got 6 people who disagree about something really trivial and straightforward just to cause a problem. And so it's impossible to get consensus. So you should operate by consensus on Wikipedia. For any knowledge claim you make, you should be able to have a verifiable reference, and you should be able to make coherent and logical arguments to convince your peers. That's the way it should work.
The peers being, who are the peers that are on that jury? Other editors. How many editors are there? How do they do that?
It depends on the page. How many people are interested in that page? You have a watch list, so you can watch and see what happens to those pages. Like
the architecture of it is really interesting, how we organize ourselves that way about knowledge, and it's very educationally significant, and it's really an interesting thing. You've written a definitive, your dissertation was on that.
Yes.
Congratulations on tracking that, and you're teaching it now, and you're involved in this. It's a very, very interesting field, you know, and I just wish you all the very best as you do it, because I think it's a really valuable thing. I'm sorry I got off on so many different issues that have to do with values and so forth, but I think it's an extremely important, and as Bucky Fuller would say, it contributes to the living repattern, contributes to the advancement, the progressive advancement of the human condition. And I thank you and all the people at Wikipedia for putting it together. I want to learn more, and I can do that by just investigating. Okay, where do people go to know? How do they get to it and everything? Maybe you could say, we're going to run the credits now. We've run out of time.
Or just wikipedia.org.
Just wikipedia.org.
From that, you'll see the logo of the incomplete jigsaw puzzle of human knowledge.
Yeah.
And then all the language versions that you can select.
It's an important, really important thing. And you're down at NYU now,
Correct.
right? Okay. And, well, thank you very much for viewing in the audience. I think we're running short on time now, but it's Joseph Reagle. What do we say, Joseph Reagle? You have a PhD, Dr. Reagle? Or was Reagle something? I said, anyway, it's Joseph Reagle, Jr., PhD, and why do we say Regal Beagle? What did we say at the beginning of this thing when your name Regal? Dr. Regal? No, what was it we said?
Oh, I just said it rhymes with Beagle.
Oh, rhymes with
Eagle.
Beagle. Is that what it was?
I think so.
Okay, I thought there was something more important, sort of poetic alliteration, and maybe we can go back and check the beginning. We can go back and rerun to the beginning and get it. That's part of the comprehensive capability we have to get at information and so forth with feedback loops and so forth. And Joseph, thank you very much.